Hello, my name is Andrew Beckton, and I am a teacher at Palestine ISD. And today we are going to be discussing a brief needs assessment over a recent unit that we went over with our students, the Constitutional Era Unit for 8th grade U.S. History. And we're going to be kind of discussing how our TEKs are going to play a central role in this needs assessment with our students. Now, during the unit, or rather after the unit, when we took our test, we did use DMAC, which I'm sure we are all familiar with, and we were able to run reports on the data, which made it much easier for us to understand where our students were in regards to the TEKs. We just did a basic performance summary with item analysis to sort of isolate each question and determine what areas went well and what areas may not have gone so well. After running the assessments, we began to look at the grade distribution. And if you look at the chart here, you'll notice that this represents the grade distribution for the Constitutional Era Unit assessment. Adding the amount of students together, there are about 25 students. 5 scored rather well, between a 90 and 100. And then in the middle, you'll see a majority that fell kind of between that, 70 to 89 mark. Roughly half of the students did that. And however, 5 students did score below a 70, indicating a significant portion of those students did not demonstrate mastery of the content. And so this data suggests a need for improved instructional alignment as well as student preparation. Now, again, isolating the TEKs and looking at the ones which students may have struggled a bit more with, we can see that this chart shows student performance aligned to specific TEKs within the unit. The highest areas of struggle were TEKS 8.16a, which focuses on the Bill of Rights, as well as TEKS 8.19b, which covers checks and balances. Additionally, students showed difficulty with federalism, which is one of the guiding principles of government found in TEKS 8.17c, and the structure of the Constitution under TEKS 8.15c. These results indicate that students are struggling with foundational concepts that are related to how the government is structured and how it operates. So this next chart reflects student perceptions of their preparedness for the test. Now, this is going to come from the Google survey, the Google form that I gave my students. This is the brief needs assessment, and just kind of asking students some very general questions about how prepared did they feel, what kind of study habits did they utilize prior to the tests, just questions of that nature, and even their perception of like how the test aligns with the notes that they took and how we prepared in class. And so these are some of the areas that we're going to be covering as we discuss this. So again, this chart reflects student perceptions of their preparedness for the tests. A majority of the students selected neutral or disagreed or strongly disagreed when asked if they felt prepared. So I really did appreciate the honesty as much as it kind of surprised me, which kind of an eye-opener, because you just assume that when you set your kids up, you think you're setting them up for success. You give them their study guides, you send out parent square reminders, you tell them, hey, there's a test coming up on such and such date, please have your students study the study guide, study their notes. And so you would kind of think from the teacher perspective that as a whole, your students would feel much more prepared for the test. But really only a small number of students felt confident going into the assessment. And this kind of suggests that students may not be receiving enough structured review in my class, which is kind of sobering when you think about it. Or, they may just not know how to effectively prepare for a test. I mean, there's many variables that could be going on here that would prevent students from effectively preparing for the test. So again, this one kind of, I can't say it caught me off guard completely, but I had expected a little more confidence from my students. So it is certainly something that I'm going to address moving forward, and I'll get into some of those remedies a little bit later on. Again, this kind of leads us to the study habits of our students. You know, I, I feel like this chart may not necessarily reflect what the previous chart showed, but anyways, it says this chart highlights student study habits. Only 5 students reported that they always study before tests. Now, again, this is coming from one class, one group of students, while the majority indicated that they study only sometimes or rarely. Again, I appreciate the honesty, and I think I only got this much honesty because my Google my Google survey or my Google form allowed their results or their names to be withheld. They did not have to provide their identity. I didn't want them to, actually. I can kind of guess some of them, especially in the never the never section and the always section. It's kind of easy to figure out, in some cases, but again, a few students, like I said, reported never studying at all. And this lack of consistent study habits is likely contributing to lower performance and especially a lack of confidence during the assessments. And you can see that, in the way that it shows. Yeah. Now, the perception of test alignment. This one, again, took me off guard a little bit. This chart shows how students perceive the alignment between the instruction and the assessments. As a precursor, I use backward design. So whenever I'm planning out a unit, I start with the test and I work my way backwards. And I try to make sure that anything that we are introducing to our students in that unit is reflected on the test. Now, granted, there can be some fluff, there can be some extra things that I teach that may not necessarily be on the test. They may not be readiness or supporting standards, but they're things that I think add a little flavor, to the lessons. But anyways, while some students agreed that the tests reflect what was taught, a large number selected neutral, or they just disagreed. And of course, you have those that strongly disagree, and when that happens, sometimes I'm not going to discredit that answer, but of course, at times you just wonder how much of these are genuinely being answered from a place of genuine concern as opposed to just throwing an answer out there. But anyways, this indicates a possible disconnect between classroom instruction and assessment expectations. So that's something that I'm going to have to look more into. Improving alignment is going to be critical to increasing student confidence and performance. I know, in my experience, before I was ever a teacher, I was a student too. And I can specifically recall a time in a college course that I took where a professor, his tests never seemed to line up with what we talked about in class. And so that can be frustrating, and that can certainly do damage to your confidence, especially as a student. Moving forward, I also provided a section on the survey that allowed for students to give their own oral feedback or written feedback. I'm sorry. So student feedback did provide valuable insight into their experience with testing and grading. Many students expressed that tests feel more difficult than the work completed in class. I mean, look at the very first one. It says tests feel harder than what we do in class. Also, let me look down the list a little bit. If you look at the last one, it does say, if you can see my mouse, the test has stuff we didn't really focus on. I do have to acknowledge that that happens at times. There might be things that we kind of gloss over, and then when it comes test day, students don't recount that because we glossed over it. Um, so yes, several students also mentioned that they are unsure what to study, which of course impacts their preparation. And it says, I forget stuff unless we, right here, I forget stuff unless we go over it again. Um, and that, it says practice questions. This is a good one. I really like this. Practice questions help me more than notes. So that is something that I will certainly be looking at moving onward. Maybe a few more questions, little previews of what they might be able to expect on that test. Again, a common theme was the need for more review and practice before the assessments, just like that one student mentioned. And the third one there, it says, we need more review before the tests. They were very blunt about that. I generally have a single lesson, usually the day before the test, where we review. And if there's time, I might go over things with the kids, briefly for a few minutes, let them ask any last minute questions before I actually administer the test. But I can see that clearly there is a need that my students are expressing about having more practice. Students also indicated that practice questions, like I said, are more helpful than simply reviewing the notes. And again, overall, this feedback reinforces the need for clearer expectations and better alignment. And of course, as students are pointing out, more structured review opportunities prior to taking the test. Again, my key findings, based on both the quantitative data and the student feedback, several key findings emerged. First, again, as we mentioned at the very beginning, looking at the data, there is low mastery in the critical TEKS, particularly those related to the Bill of Rights and checks and balances. Secondly, students do not feel adequately prepared for assessments. Again, that one hit me kind of hard. Third, inconsistent study habits are contributing to lower performance. Once again, sometimes the students are going to have to really be a little more proactive and study, even when they go home. I try to build in a few study days. I don't like to tell a kid a day before a test that they're going to have a test. I make a habit of at least 3 days notice, as well, 4 days if possible. And I always send out a parent square and tell the parents, hey, this is what your child can be studying all the way up to the test. So maybe being a little more connected with parents would help. But again, finally, there is a perceived misalignment between the instruction and the testing, which may be impacting student confidence. Again, I know I use the word perceived, but there could quite possibly be that as well. So sort of to close things out, to look at the recommendations, I would say I would increase STAR-aligned practice questions, as it says, to better prepare students for the assessments. And second, I would provide structured and consistent review opportunities prior to testing, taking a little more time to work with the kids before the test, not just one lesson like I'm kind of guilty of doing. Third, I want to incorporate formative assessments such as exit tickets to monitor understanding throughout the unit. A lot of spiraling, but definitely exit tickets that can kind of put proof, the proof is in the pudding because they're showing me as they're walking out the door that they either understand or they don't, right? Fourth, just again, with the spiraling, just reteach these difficult TEKS, especially those that are related to the Bill of Rights and federalism that were kind of the ones that were missed a lot more than others. And finally, just to incorporate engaging review strategies, right? Things like interactive games, practice activities, things like that can definitely reinforce learning. So in conclusion, This needs assessment highlights the importance of using data to drive instruction by aligning the teaching practices with student needs and focusing on the key teaks that we were discussing. Together, both student and teacher, we can improve our understanding and, of course, the performance on the assessment. So thank you again for your time, and have a nice day. Thanks for listening.